So now let's move to the next session. So to have a better understanding on what clinical engineers are doing in different countries. So today we are pleased to have our distinguished guest panelists here. So from China, US, and UK. So please first allow me to introduce them first. So Dr. Yadin David, he is the editor-in-chief of the Global Clinical Engineering Journal and the interim president of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliances. Maybe wave your hands. Yes. So next we have Mr. Tom Judd, and he's the former chair of the IFMBE CED board, and he's at the Global Clinical Engineering Alliances Founders Council. So say hi. Yes. So next we have Kallirroi Stavrianou. So she is the manager of the Global Clinical Engineering Journal and the Global CE Alliances. Hi. Okay, and then so here from China we have Mr. Li Bing. He's from the Shanghai Six People's Hospital, affiliated to Shanghai Jiao Tong University School of Medicine. Hello. Yes. And Mr. Zheng Kun, he is the director of the governance, risk, and compliance of at the Children's Hospital, Zhejiang University School of Medicine. Yes. And then next we have Mrs. Lo Xiaomin, and she's the secretary of the Commission for the Discipline Inspection at the Hangzhou Red Cross Hospital. Yes. And last but not least, we have Ms. Zhao Jing. She's the director of Department of Biomedical Engineering at the China-Japan Friendship Hospital. Hello. Yes. Okay, so welcome, everybody's here again. So I just guess gonna jump into our topics again right away. So first question. So actually we have a lot of people here who are really curious about what is the career path of clinical engineers in United States. So maybe Mr. Tom, you could start with some of your experience on this question first, please.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to give two examples, but first let me just say there's many pathways to grow as a clinical engineer in the United States. I myself had an undergraduate degree in another engineering discipline other than biomedical engineering, in this case aerospace, but and then got a master's in that area, but then later got medical engineering, master's training, and entered the field as a clinical engineer, and then grew in my career. But the two classical pathways, I would say, are both government related in my country. And one is, so how do you go from technician, bench level repair kinds of work up until management? And there's one government program that does very specialized technical training, electronic bench training across many different clinical devices, many different clinical areas. And those folks typically may not have a 4-year degree, but they use this very rigorous technical training. Not everybody passes this course. It's very rigorous. And then they move into bench level work and then grow into management after that. So that's the sort of the technician rise into management approach. The second is someone gets a 4-year degree, is recruited by this government program that has over 200 hospitals, perhaps has a junior year, a staff year as a clinical engineer, a probation year where they get like an internship for perhaps a year or two, and then they get a junior clinical engineering role and then grow as, and manage more and more technology areas in a hospital. So two classic pathways from me, Amy.
Okay, that's interesting. So Dr. Yadin, maybe you can share some of your experience as well.
Sure, Meng. First of all, it is a pleasure for me to be with such distinguished faculty and seeing some old friends that I didn't get to see in person for a long time. And I'm looking forward to be able to raise a glass and have a drink with them, as well as with new friend, Miss Jing Chao. That's a pleasure to meet you. I'm happy to be part of this Congress of Clinical Engineering and the Clinical Engineering Day celebration. Career is important to all of us. We all want to be recognized for what we know and what we practice. So the growth is part of our daily life. In the US, it's very interesting to see that the growth of clinical engineering profession is leading towards the IT area. So those clinical engineers who have engaged in training in IT, cybersecurity, compliance, and privacy, interoperability are some of the area where they gain also opportunity to grow in their career and receive additional responsibility and managing more people in the program. As Tom, I would like to bring short example. I was invited to review the Stanford Medical Center in-house biomedical engineering operation and recommended different things to get done in order to move them into the future management role of medical technology. One of them was to get more involved with the IT area, and clinical engineers receive specific responsibility from the hospital administration to this interoperability and engagement of IT with medical devices at the point of care. They brought a clinical engineer, put him as a manager over the pediatric, the children program, and this individual grew with responsibility to become part of the IT management team. So he is part of the IT department, and just recently, the last couple of weeks, he was promoted to administration executive level, so he is seeing more of the overall operation. A typical career growth, not yet for everyone, but a good example of what is possible in North America.
Okay, that's a really interesting example here. So I'm really sure that the audience today here will have a better picture for this question. So we'll move on to the second one. So of course, that's part of the job for the clinical engineers. So in the planning for the efficient equipment deployment, so what is the role for clinical engineers then? So Mr. Tom, you go first.
Thanks, Amy. I would say the principle here for efficient equipment deployment is discussing the best practices with clinicians so that together you figure out an optimal solution for that deployment. And you know, how does care get delivered? It gets delivered through a clinical workflow. So discussing with those clinicians, how do you adjust the workflow using technology maybe to make this a process better, quicker, and faster, more efficient? So the example I will give is all of us remember electrocardiograms, EKG, ECG. You know, not so distant past, somebody would take an EKG on a patient using an EKG machine. Then they would take that paper strip. Some doctor maybe is busy and would maybe looks at it right away, but maybe takes it home, maybe a stack of EKG strips, recordings. And then overnight, maybe they grade what they see on this EKG if it's, you know, a very busy practice, and they bring it back the next day. Hopefully they didn't lose anything. And then somebody else checks their work. Another doctor looks over and says, yes, I agree with this particular diagnosis. And so this process in its best situation maybe can take a day or longer. In the modern day, clinical engineers working with clinicians to improve this workflow, they would say, go to the bedside, take the EKG, have it wirelessly uploaded into the electronic medical record, have the electronic medical record automatically send this EKG digital recording to a cardiologist or some other physician to read the EKG. He or she reads that EKG, sends it back to the electronic medical record, where automatically it goes to a second physician who overreads it and agrees or disagrees with that diagnosis, and then sends that information back to the electronic medical record. So everything about the EKG is solved in 1 hour instead of 1 day. Over.
Great. I'll jump in, Amy, and will add my comments to it. When you look at the equipment or asset management. The role of clinical engineers are very specific and very interesting. You have the clinicians, both nurses, pathologists in the lab, and physician in the point of care, where they want to have more precise diagnostic, faster and better tool to apply corrective activity like surgery and so on. The clinical engineer have the role of identifying the problem, what the new technology will solve as far as a problem. And that's what we bring to the table. So when we do asset planning, first of all, we want to make sure that we do no harm, that we don't add risk and unsafe condition for the patient. We want to make sure that we identify what we're going to solve, what problem this additional technology will solve, and at the same time, what new risk that might be introducing that we need to plan for. So the role of clinical engineer is specifically, and if I'll have to give an example, I would say COVID-19 was a perfect opportunity to demonstrate our problem-solving capability. We ran out of assets, specifically ventilator, oxygen-producing plant, and oxygen concentrator, infusion pump at the point of care. And what the clinical engineers did, they came up with solution of sharing ventilators. Not in every case is right, but it has additional risk introduction that were not there before. But with that, with assessment, we saw a problem, we offer a solution, and we raise the opportunity to monitor more safe and reduce the risk. Sharing ventilator is difficult and risky, but if you do it correctly, it is possible, and we save lives that way. So COVID-19 gave us an opportunity to demonstrate our skill in equipment planning.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And you mentioned about the COVID-19, and we actually have some questions later to talk about that. And so here is one way that you are talking about, sharing experience. And actually another way to share this around the world to all the CEs, so is to actually publish in papers. So next questions that I'm actually gonna ask my Chinese colleagues here. So we got some questions saying that there are some observations that maybe there are relatively less manuscripts from clinical engineers. So what may be the obstacles or like why publications from clinical engineers are not subject that is sufficiently important for people to produce this manuscript? So I will first ask Ms. Yadin to have some sharings, please.
I'm all ears.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you for the question, and good morning, good evening, everybody, distinguished friends. I'm new, but I really want to share my idea about this question. I think the paper is the summary of the experience, is the presentation of scientific research, and is the display of innovation. The education background of the most Chinese CEs are undergraduate. Master's degree is limited. Doctor's degree is rare. And it is an obstacle to most Chinese CE doing clinical research. In China, many CEs have to wait months to even more than a year to publish their Chinese paper. Today, the papers of CEs in China are going through the development process from summing up experience to innovation presentation, innovative presentation. Today, Chinese CEs have paid more and more attention to having the global view and historical vision in their profession. Of course, language is still the barrier for most CEs to publishing their paper in English. Global Clinical Engineering Journal, I feel that it is a very valuable professional exchange platform for CE to share their experience around the world. Here are some of my recommendations about this journal. The first, clear readers for researchers or CEs. I think maybe for CEs would be better. In China, most CEs will be more interested in equipment management and experience sharing, clinical research and management exploration or cutting-edge equipment information. The second, enrich the columns so that different levels of CEs can constantly get useful information they need. And the third, pay more attention to publicity. In addition to introduce and share the journal on some of the conference, more publicity methods can be discussed, such as links to other relevant, well-known platforms, become a journal of SAI, so that CEs in different countries can be familiar with the journal. They will easily establish a global view through journals. Think of it as their most important professional journal. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And maybe Mr. Zheng Kun, would you have something to add on this?
Yes, thank you, Amy. This is an excellent and challenging question, which requires to examine closely and have a self-reflection about our clinical engineering profession, in particular, the hospital-based clinical engineering. We claim and believe that we are professionals who support and make great contributions to health and patient care. Take the hospital clinical engineering in China as an example. The latest baseline survey shows there are about 95,000 clinical engineers and technologists in mainland China working in hospitals above level 2, which in total is about 13,000 hospitals. Although the hospital clinical engineering as a whole, in particular, in those high-level academic hospitals, developed a lot in areas of program responsibility coverage, strengthening HTM capability, and field innovation with coverage. And but comparison to their fundamental stages 13 years ago, yet compare with our other healthcare professionals like physicians, nurses, pharmacists, lab technicians, hospital clinical engineer profession, orientation is playing low professional activities, quality control, and career development paths are still somewhat lack consensus, unrecognized, and under development. Professional technical title promotion for CE staff is still obscure, ununified, and even absent, which remains a great challenge for CE team building and talents retaining. Writing papers and sharing them with peers is an extremely important indicator for a profession. It's an output and manifestation for clinical engineering's contribution to healthcare support and advancement. It's also needed for clinical engineers along their professional career development and promotion. So the Chinese hospital clinical engineers write a lot of HTM and CE papers and get them published in Chinese journals. Compare with our other team players mentioned above, in particular, writing and publishing high-quality English papers and sharing them with our international peers, it's still a big weak spot. As a matter of fact, not the publications from CE are subjects that are less sufficiently important for people to produce manuscripts. Language barrier for writing English papers is a reason here, but willingness and motivation are big reasons too. We definitely need to enhance our capacity building, including language ability, promote learning from each other on international level, yet to facilitate hospitals' career growth paths by combining efforts and measures from whole C community and relevant professional associations is also very important. As the only true English CE journal existing, namely the Clinical Engineering Journal and the Global Clinical Engineering Journal, I trust if the latter becomes indexed by ACI, it also will be a great promoter and definitely attract more manuscripts written by Chinese clinical engineers, and some currently submitting to other English journals in biomedical engineering fields. With more and more young generation and talents entering hospital CE profession and more clear CE career promotion paths developing, along with the CE international collaboration, I believe there will be more and more good quality English CHTM papers written and published by Chinese clinical engineers soon. Together, let's make it better. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zhang. And so as Dr. Yadin is the editor-in-chief of this journal, and I noticed that you have making some notes. So I'm sure, yeah, they're giving you some inspirations for the journal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I think your mic is muted.
Zheng might be excited to know that with Kallirroi, we are applying for SCI this month. So we'll see what happens next.
Right.
Already?
Yeah. So I guess so we can move to the next questions. So we mentioned about the innovation. So do American clinical engineers pay attention to cutting edge medical equipment information, and what and how do they pay attention to? And also, do clinical engineers play a role in this innovation or like R&D of the medical devices? And this also linked to the risk management of it in the US hospital. So there's some questions that we're really curious about. And I know that Mr. Tom have worked at the Kaiser Permanente. So maybe you have some the experience that would like to share to us on this.
Thank you, Amy. And let me just call out my colleague, Mr. Mario Castaneda, who unfortunately passed away on October 1st, but he led a wonderful 500-person clinical engineering group for Kaiser Permanente's 440 hospitals, not 400, 40 hospitals and 600 clinics. And so when I joined him several years ago, I saw a best practice about how American clinical engineers pay attention to cutting edge medical equipment information and emerging information. And that is, he created clinical technology groups. And this is doctors and nurses and clinical engineers and administrators gathered together around each clinical subspecialty. So when you think about the human body, there's 15 to 20 different organ systems. And so we created, respiratory, orthopedic, cardiac, and so on. So imagine 15 to 20 groups, separate groups that meet regularly and have clinical engineers and doctors and nurses and others looking at emerging tools, emerging procedures, looking at health technologies that support these new clinical procedures, and deciding what am I going to replace existing equipment with, what new equipment am I going to buy, how do I move my inventory of assets, as Yadin talked about, forward to incorporate the newest emerging tools. And so those groups that met throughout the year, allowed clinical engineers to work with clinicians to decide what's the best new equipment to purchase. Over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Dr. Yadin, do you have something to share?
Thank you, Meng. The concept of clinical engineering and innovation is something that some people in America are taking for granted. It's so entrenched and so part of our job that in daily practices, clinical engineers in the US are continuously involved with innovation. Innovation used to be in a research lab far away from the point of care, not part of the hospital. The hospital would see a product coming later on from those research labs. That has changed in the US. The clinical trial and research of new medical product is part of hospital operation in US these days. Many innovation and patents are registered with collaboration of clinical engineers named on those patents because they're coming up from our ability, again, one more time, to see a problem at the point of care and propose a solution that together with industry becoming to be a new product, a new apps, and a new solution. So in the US, clinical engineers are involved daily in innovation at the point of care by solving problem, by going to conferences and visiting the exhibit floor where industry is showing their best ware and the best product that they want to offer, and by reading journals and manuscript specifically from the product development and new innovation literature. We are seeing that being part of daily routine, as I'm saying. With that, I must also introduce the idea that our job is controlling risk management. Li Bin is familiar with quality, increased quality. You cannot do that without the compliance of risk management. And part of the new concept of keeping up with innovation is the idea of forensic engineering duties that are becoming to be new field, new extension of clinical engineering in the US. This risk management, this forensic engineering is looking at what new risk innovation may introduce, from artificial hearts to robotics to catheters and to monitoring, and how can we mitigate and reduce and control that. So pay attention, pick up your books and go and pick up courses on forensic engineering, because I believe it's exciting, rewarding, and the coming field of clinical engineers.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yadin. And actually, that's quite interesting topic for forensic engineering as well. So for innovation, with all the safety issues, so during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have experienced a lot of different issues and challenges as well. So that's actually lead to our next topic. So in recent years in China, maybe what are some changes in clinical engineers field since the COVID-19 pandemic happened here? Maybe Ms. Lo can share some of the observations here.
Okay, thank you. And I have 5 points to express. The first one is the whole industry, including clinical engineering in the hospital, are doing great job in innovation since COVID outbreak, such as developing nucleic acid sampling cabin and testing kits, and ventilators, disinfection equipment, masks, and medical protective suits, infrared thermometers, etc. Many new approaches for fighting COVID were explored in recent 3 years. The second point, before COVID-19, we usually attend academic conference on weekends. Since 2020, we could have online meetings every evening plus weekends. There are fewer face-to-face communication opportunities, while online communication opportunities have been multiplied. I'm talking about an exponential increase. We are getting more information and more knowledge. Many clinical engineers have new apps in their smartphone and computer, such as Zoom and Tencent Meeting. This saves the trouble of traveling and accommodation, while on the other hand, we have less opportunity to visit hospitals and make person-to-person communication. The third one, clinical engineer become very alert to hospital infection control in terms of personal hygiene and equipment disinfection. They disinfect equipment upon new arrival and before maintenance. It's good to develop such a routine. The fourth one, problem on supply chain. In China, some clinical engineers are responsible for the procurement center, including medical devices, medical supplies. Since 2020, due to supply chain breakdown, from time to time, many imported medical consumables and devices have been replaced by domestic ones, which promotes the application of domestic products and bring more opportunities to China medical device industry. Hospitals always keep enough stock of PPE just in case, and sometimes we have to wait longer time for the repair parts. And the fifth one, which is the last one of my points, when engineers from manufacturer got quarantined, they are not able to come to hospital. In-home clinical engineer would have to do the installation by themselves. This is a challenge they never faced before, but it can also be an opportunity for personal development. They read the service menu and get instructions from manufacturer remotely or through online meetings. They make every effort to finish the job before the due time. Their self-learning capability and service skill improve significantly, especially on equipment from ER and the lab. And the above will be my points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lau. And Mr. Zheng Kun, do you have something to add from your point of view?
Yes, thank you, Amy. I just echo Ms. Low by emphasizing that since COVID-19, clinical engineers work to front stage from behind, from unsung hero to highly recognized healthcare team player. Besides, our abilities on field innovation, collaboration with other team players, and emergency preparedness are greatly improved. Over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zheng. So here we are talking about the experience we have here in China, and so Mr. Li Bing here, I actually have a question for you. So maybe since you have engaged on sort of like international webinars a lot, so would you like to share some of experience, like how can we improve participation of like more Chinese CEs to engage in such like international events?
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's also there's challenges for us. First of all, there are still some, as Professor Zhao has said, there's some problems for the language. And the second is some internet software problems for China mainland. So, but I will still say with the progress of the globalization, especially in the face of the common challenge of the COVID-19 epidemic, the global clinical engineering college need to work together to share the experience and find some solutions. So we need to find some way to work together. The participation now in China, clinical engineering in the international committee is not so high. Sometimes we need to do, maybe I can give some suggestion, because the first problem is language. So we need to expand the influence of relevant the international organization, internationals into China, introduce various international conference, especially introduce some important international conference through various channels like the magazines like the broadcast and recorded. Let more clinical engineering in China know that. Second, further introduce the relevant resource of international organizations to domestic clinical engineering colleges. Let them know the internationals some resources. We can find it. It's very useful. Third, let our Chinese clinical engineer works with good English foundation can participate in some international conference to exchange their working experience and sharing their solutions together. And the fourth, if possible, that some our Chinese clinical engineering with both CE ground and English good foundations can participate in some project of some our IFMBE CED or GCEA's international organization, such as capacity building of the IFMBE's project. And further, in the future, would like invite, we will take more international conference, if possible, in China, invite more foreign guests like Yadin and Tom and Kallirroi to China to introduce their program. At last, I wish the Global Clinical Engineering Journal can become the SCI journal in the near future. Then, if that's true, become true, our Chinese CE will pay more attention to such magazines, just because these papers of SCI journal is very important to the hospital. So these people will pay more attention to together to participate in the more this project. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And I believe like with more younger generation are really interested in our field now. So definitely we're looking forward to have more input and more participations from China here in the future. So so here I actually had a interesting question that since we know that our ultimate goal for clinical engineers is to have a safe patient care. So with the development of like AR and software as like medical devices, so how to have a proper quality control? So that's actually a question. So Dr. Yadin, do you like to or talk? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, Lee Bin need to answer when you talk about quality control.
Yes.
Need to answer a question like that. When the question includes things like augmented reality and software as medical devices, you're talking really about cutting edge, not yet the general practice that you see in hospital, but we need to be prepared. So it's excellent question that suggests that we need to take proactive action and educate ourselves on how do you measure performance of such system and what can you do at the point of care to ensure the quality of adoption of such technology. Regulatory agency around the world and specifically in the US has determined that AR and software as medical devices are actually products that need to be compliant with the safety and risk management guidelines that are included in both voluntarily and mandatory regulation. And they are going to be controlled as such by the regulatory agency. And we need to find the tools of how do you move the development tool of such product and application into the point of care that we can measure and adjust the quality to the level that is acceptable. CE that are going to be involved in that must have additional education specifically to validate and verify software application and images quality, especially in the latencies that involve with augmented reality. So as more and more equipment is becoming part of this field, I feel that we need to offer training and tools on how to measure the quality of such products that are coming, not yet our main street practice, but we need to be ready and we need to develop those.
Okay, thank you. And Tom, would you have something to share?
While my brother Yadin was talking, I just thought of an example of that. You know, for a long time, the promise of electronic medical records integrated with medical devices, the prime example might be blood pressure control of a patient. So if you can imagine, you know, infusing a particular drug and is it's causing a reaction in the human body, when the EMR, and that's integrated into the electronic medical record, maybe up against the norms of what that patient and their particular, what are the limits that the blood pressure should be hitting. And maybe that EMR is giving feedback now back to the medical device to, or the infusion device to change the dosing to get the blood pressure to the right range. This is an example of software as a medical device that clinical engineers might be in the middle of, where these kind of quality controls and validations are going to be very important. Yadin, maybe a comment.
Dr. Yadin, do you have something to add? You're on mute.
I was on mute, sorry. I think that Tom covered it.
Okay, great, good. And actually to continue with this topic, so we see that more and more medical equipments are being networked for better efficiency. So how do clinical engineers evaluate and enhance the safety of data transferring and cybersecurity actually of the hospital? So Tom, would you jump to that question first?
And I'll address the first part of that, and Yadin the second, that hey, networked medical devices like I just described, infusion device, the ability to change dosing to maybe achieve blood pressure control. Those kind of network devices have grown maybe from 10 years ago to 10% of medical devices, maybe in recent years to as much as 50% of emerging medical devices in our country. And so clinical engineers partnering with IT and with clinicians can ensure this interoperability, this interplay that I was just talking about with blood pressure control. Information from the patient through the device, sent to the electronic medical record, sent back to the device, sent back to the patient. That interoperability and monitoring it and ensuring safety through that has become very, very important. Yadin?
Yes, I would like to address specifically the issue relating to cybersecurity. This is becoming such a hot topic for healthcare system that we can't avoid it anymore, and we need to collaborate across the world, from North America to Asia and China, and figuring out how can we resolve this bad problem. Recently in the US, we have cybersecurity breaches within hospital that were able, unfortunately, to freeze hospital operation. Tom just talked about the electronic medical record. In those hospitals, the electronic medical record was captured by hackers, was frozen, and was unavailable online. The hospital has to remove the ability to use electronic communication, to use form and paper and pen back like it used to be 10 years ago. Not being prepared for that added to the problem. Ransom was requested, money was paid, and this is a major issue. First of all, I'm talking about patient care that was not able to be delivered under such condition. Secondary is the financial burden of paying ransom. And thirdly is the principle that this is unacceptable behavior and we need to find a way to stop it. Therefore, more clinical engineers are needed to get education and understand how to practice in the world of privacy protection and data protection in network world of connected medical devices. A colleague of mine in St. Louis, who served as director of clinical engineering in a big hospital there, just received a responsibility to be the cybersecurity director for the hospital. And he took several courses, and his IT education helped him. And he is now looking specifically at how to harden, how to make the walls around the network in the hospital more robust and harder to penetrate. He is so involved in that he had to give up the clinical engineering part of his job as a manager to somebody else. So this is a specific example of what is taking place and how much we need to be part of it. The Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, for example, was recently contracted by an industry member who was interested to understand the extent of such problem as it relates to surgical robots system. And we did an international study around the world of what are the issues. We interviewed physicians, surgeons, and clinical engineers and IT directors in Japan, Canada, UK, India, US, Brazil, and so on, so Israel as well. And what we learned is that everybody struggles with it and everybody is reinventing the wheel. We need to establish a task force among ourselves to share this knowledge and to educate the rest of the team and do it sooner rather than later. Cybersecurity breaches is real. We are behind the curve. We're not up to date with that. And we need to get together, share our knowledge, bring experts to educate us, and move on and take care of the issue. Thank you for this question, Xiaomin.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Yeah.
Amy, may I just add a quick comment here?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
thanks for Tom Judd's recommendation. And we just invite Axel Worth, the subject matter expert on the networked medical device cybersecurity, and to give us a lecture on the introduction of cybersecurity of networked medical devices. And this is a sideline program of the famous HTM training program in China, Flying Over the Hump. And this one is organized actually by the Miss Zhao Jing, and she is also here. So anyone interested in this coming course may ask for Miss Zhao Jing to attend the course if possible. Yeah, thank you.
And Axel Worth was involved with the surgical robotic study that I just mentioned, so he can tell you more about it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I don't feel like I just feel like I don't want to stop this conversation, but so all those are really impressive answers. So from you all, and although we couldn't really meet, like face to face in person, but by having this way, I think we can still share and learn from each other. So actually, this is also, I believe, what the Global CE Journal and Global CE Alliance are continuously been doing, and then provide such opportunities to promote this communication. But just so, Ms. Kallirroi, do you have something maybe you want to add on for this?
Yes. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to stress out some very important things about the Global Clinical Engineering Journal, which is the only journal that is dedicated to clinical engineering. Global Clinical Engineering Journal is a diamond open access journal, thus offering both authors and readers free access while maintaining high quality peer review and editing processes. Our experienced copy editor and reviewers ensure that the language issues will be eliminated. So hopefully language will not be a barrier anymore. We are also grateful for Meng, as he's providing help to Chinese colleagues when needed. So if you register from China, please email your information to Meng if you need help. Send us your manuscript and also encourage your colleagues to do so. You can do that on www.globalce.org. The journal is archived and indexed and receives manuscripts from the list of topics you can see here. The journal has published several issues so far and has reached the 5th volume, among which are special issues dedicated to proceedings on the International Clinical Engineering and Health Technology Management Congresses. We are very happy to notify you that there are available Chinese translations on the website on most of the volumes published, and you can open them by clicking on the active links on the left. Last but not least, I would like to mention the immense growth of the international presence of Global Clinical Engineering Alliance, which has several member associations, which you can see here. So we invite you to join our worldwide clinical engineering community by becoming a member. You can do that on www.globalcea.org. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much again for all of your shares today. And me personally have actually learned a lot, and I'm really sure that audience both from China and abroad have gained a lot of many insights on all these topics. And so I hope in the near future we can still have more opportunities like this. So I guess so this will be all for today. And thank you so much for you all to participate in this. Thank you so much. 谢谢。